The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
Yes, hello everyone and welcome to All You Can Eat. It is the podcast about deliciousness. I'm your host, Rob Rosenthal, coming to you with episode number 84 today on the 8th day of July, 2020. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to those of you who have been. Welcome to the new folks who are tuning in. Very excited to be with you this evening to talk about deliciousness and moreover with a guest, with a great guest, by the way. I was super excited to speak with Ariane Daguin. And Ariane is a woman who 35 years ago founded a company here in New York. A French woman who came to New York, founded a company called D'Artagnan, if you want to be kind of French about it, and that's fine. And you know, those who know me know that I recommend for a living. I recommend only those things that I truly believe in, and I have no stake in it. I mean, in full disclosure, nobody is paying me to recommend, to promote in any way, and if they did, I would tell you. I will tell you this, that if you've been shopping, in any kind of store that sells more of your, kind of high-end product, you might be familiar with the name D'Artagnan. D-A-R-T, Dart, A-G-N-A-N, D'Artagnan, who is famous for having been one of the three musketeers, one of the great ones, of course. And Ariane came to this country and 35 years ago founded D'Artagnan, the company, and they produce just gloriously delicious, sustainable, organic meat, game, duck, poultry, foie gras, caviar, charcuterie, mushrooms, truffles. I mean, this is beautiful, beautiful food. Ariane, in that time, has become super recognized and awarded for her work. So when I call her kind of like, whether you want to call her a visionary or a vanguard or even a legend, I'm not overstating the case. She's been given, kind of every award in the business, Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Specialty Food Association, Most Creative People in the Business by Fast Company magazine. She's on the board of the James Beard Foundation. She's serious and super successful, and most importantly, has introduced Americans to foods that we were not familiar with 35 years ago, or at least didn't have access to. And again, I'm talking about kind of like foie gras and different game meats and wild mushrooms, and even kind of was a pioneer behind the organic free-range movement. Now, why is this so important? It's important because during this difficult period with the kind of lockdown of the pandemic, one of the most obvious kind of businesses that has suffered is the restaurant business. I can't even begin to tell you how many millions of people or how many are out of work and how many businesses have been impacted by the fact that we can't basically go out to restaurants at any reasonable, past level. And it's not only the restaurants and their employees that have been impacted by this, it's also all the people that deliver to them, whether it's the flower people or the people that clean the, the linens or whatever. It's every aspect of that business has been hurt, and most hurt, honestly, are some of the farmers, the farmers that have been, for years producing the very products that you get to eat when we go out to a restaurant. And so, in this regard, I want to say one of the things that we want to do is make sure that we continue to support, to any extent possible, the business of our local farmers, whether they be in produce or whether they be in meat, poultry, eggs, whatever it is, seafood, all of that kind of stuff. It's important that we sustain the business of our local farms. Now, if you don't live near a local farm, one of the things that you can do, however, is you can go online. And there are a number of sites that of businesses that actually source product from local farms. One of those businesses, of course, is D'Artagnan. So my first and only recommendation today is that whether you go into a supermarket or a gourmet store, or more easily, whether you go online to D'Artagnan.com, again, Dartagnan, here's your opportunity to not only eat extraordinary product, but in so doing, support the local farms that are producing it. So that is essentially what I wanted to use as an introduction for my hour-long conversation, more or less, the next 50 minutes, let's say, with Ariane Daguin. And I could not be, again, as I said, I don't want to overstate it, I could not be more impressed. Came here to the United States as a young woman from a family that had been, for 7 generations in the food and restaurant business, and eventually saw an opportunity at a young age to start a business. And now, 35 years later, it's a great multi-million-dollar, national business selling super delicious, high-end product that I could not more forcefully and honestly recommend, and there you have it. So, with no further ado, let me introduce you to Ariane Daguin. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to Ariane Daguin. She is, to be honest with you, I don't want to overstate it, but the woman is both a pioneer and a legend in the food business, and I am super excited to speak to her for a variety of reasons. Ariane, how are you?
Hey, thank you very much for this warm welcome. That's very nice. I'm well. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm going to tell you why. I know that I mentioned it to you. I'm going to tell you why it's particularly exciting. I've had a lot of interesting people on the show. Sometimes, they're cookbook authors, they're journalists. I've had chefs, some of whom I'm sure you know. Jean-Georges was a great guest one day. I've had celebrity people, Gail Simmons. I've had restaurateurs, Danny Meyer. But I'll tell you why I'm particularly excited with you. And the reason is because I am a graduate of French cooking school. I was somewhere on the cusp in between Peter Kump's and the Institute of Culinary Education, and so much on the cusp that they gave me, I have a professional degree, and they literally gave me a degree from each school, which is pretty funny. But here, so I have a particular appreciation because it's French technique that I learned. So I have a particular appreciation for the kind of for French food. I've been to France. I think the last trip I made there was somewhere around my 25th or 26th trip. That was last year. I'm sorry that I can't travel at this point. And what I want to tell you is that I did a little internship right around 94. And I did the internship over at the Food Network, and I worked for a woman who said to me at some point, and I'm going to guess it was in November, hey, you want to go to a party with us? We're going to go to a restaurant on the Upper East Side, and then like Beaujolais Nouveau party. And I'm like, you kidding me? Of course I want to go. And I go to the party, and it's at the restaurant, and the restaurant is on East 79th Street, and it's called Le Trois Jeans. And in that restaurant, there's an ample supply of Beaujolais Nouveau, and the guys, the chefs are cooking this amazing food. I mean, I never had mushrooms that tasted like that. They must have been, cèpes or whatever. And then they're roasting chestnuts in there, these guys, and then you're there. And when you're there, it means that all of a sudden I'm eating all this fantastic charcuterie and pâté. I'm talking 25 years ago, but it was still one of those memories that I cannot forget. So in addition to my love of French food and that particular occasion, it's a treat for me to speak to you because I don't joke when I say that there are a few people, not only that have accomplished what you have. I mean, there's a lot of successful entrepreneurs. There are many successful food businesses, but you literally introduced America to high quality products that they kind of didn't know much about, whether it's foie gras or whether it's wild mushrooms, even you kind of push the whole organic movement. So I am really delighted to have you here, and thank you.
No, it's I thank you for thinking of me and for having me in your program today. This is very nice. And by the way, I don't know if you read, but the French Culinary Institute, which you were just talking about,
Yep.
just merged today with ICE.
Yes.
Did you see that?
I did actually notice that. It's very interesting, and I hope it's good. But at the end, it's a weird time. I mean, we have things to talk about. I think it would be helpful to tell the people a little bit about D'Artagnan. I mean, I didn't even mention the name of the company yet. It is D'Artagnan. So I think I would like to at least give you, Ariane, tell people for a couple of minutes about D'Artagnan and kind of how it came together. And then I think after that we can talk specifically about products, because I have super questions for you. And then we can talk about the state of American restaurants at this point, because we're in a very kind of strange and difficult moment. So start with that. Tell people about D'Artagnan.
So D'Artagnan is a company that I named after my favorite hero.
Mm-hmm.
I come from Gascony, southwest France, and in Gascony we revere D'Artagnan. He was a musketeer of the king, Louis XIII and Louis XIV. He was a real man, he really existed. He became the character in Alexandre Dumas' book, The Three Musketeers,
mm-hmm.
but he was a real guy, and he did great things. And in Gascony, we all think we're descendants of D'Artagnan,
right?
And we really revere him because he was so courageous, brave, loyal to his king, to his queen, of course, and he had, with everything he was doing, he had panache. He was doing things for the right reasons, not for the what's in it for me. And that's what I really like about him, and that's why I named my company after him. So D'Artagnan, the company, was founded 35 years ago. Mm-hmm. We celebrated our 35th anniversary last February, like 2 weeks before the whole world came to an end, basically, almost. And in these 35 years, we've been doing our best always to source and supply the restaurants with the best meat proteins. So in order to do that, we put together groups of farmers in the same area. We tell them how to raise the species that is the specialty of the area, like chickens in Pennsylvania with the Amish community, or in Missouri, Berkshire pork, or in Colorado, lamb, etc. And we tell them how to raise the animals, to how much space, what kind of food, never any medication, never any antibiotics, nor growth hormones. When an animal is sick, of course, we give him medication, but then the animal gets out of our program. Then we set up the processing places, the slaughterhouses, so that when it's poultry, they are processed air chilled, meaning they are not dipped in water forever, and so their flavor are more concentrated, and their shelf life is better because of that. Mm-hmm. And then we control, with our own trucks, we control all the deliveries down to the restaurants and the retail stores. And around 12 years ago, we also started a website direct to consumers with the same products. And that's actually what saved us when the pandemic started, because we already had that website, and so we had to pivot all our energy, all our labor, all our teams to the e-commerce and to the retail stores,
Right.
because overnight on March 14, 75% of our clients, the restaurant chefs, just closed down and disappeared.
Yeah. 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 It's well, we're gonna get to that part of the story. But I think, tell people also. What you did was fearless. I mean, you grew up over there in the southwest of France, in Gascony, as you said. Your dad was in the restaurant business. 7 generations of family have been involved in food. But you left there as as a college age kid, came to America, and at some point founded this company, which 35 years later is a multi-million. It's a big business producing super high end product ingredients that are used by the best chefs in America. What inspired you to kind of leave home and come over here and start a business?
Different things. I mean, leaving home was more because I was the eldest, but I was the girl, so I wasn't supposed to take over the business, the restaurant. That would have been my brother, a year younger, and it was never very official in the family, but it was always understood that at that time, like every woman, the woman is supposed to leave and follow her husband somewhere else, whereas the son is supposed to stay and take over the business. So I knew I didn't have my place there. I like to write, so I wanted to become a journalist. So I came here to follow studies, to eventually get to Columbia University, to the School of Journalism. And opportunity knocked on. I had a part-time job in a small charcuterie, Salumeria, on 13th Street in Greenwich Village. And then one day, a couple of guys came in with a foie gras in their hand. And foie gras, the fat liver of the duck or the goose, is something that was a specialty of my father, but a really big specialty of my region of France too. And so I knew about foie gras. I knew a lot about foie gras, and I saw that as wow, this is a huge opportunity. This is the first time some people, some farmers are going to raise ducks to make foie gras in America. And to me, it was history, so I couldn't pass it. And that's how the whole thing started. Even though we knew right at the very beginning, we knew we couldn't be successful just with one product, the duck and the foie gras of that duck. And so right away, we started with good poultry, good meat, game meat, game burns, things that basically the restaurateurs, the chefs at that time didn't have really access to. Or when they did, it was maybe a case or a couple of cases of frozen quail that a butcher would have put in their freezer in case somebody wanted something exotic one day. So it was a second thought. There was on menus at that time, there was only chicken, beef, and lamb, and some pork. And so the timing was great. It was at the time when the young chefs came out of all those professional cooking schools, like you did.
Right.
And it was in 1985, and the first chefs came out young and ambitious and didn't want to be hidden in the basement anymore. They wanted to be known for their creativity. And they traveled a lot to learn their trade, and they understood that the most important thing to have quality in the plate is to have quality in the ingredients that made that plate. So creativity is nice and fun and important, but most important is the quality of the ingredient. And because of that knowledge, it was it was, I don't want to say easy, because the beginnings were not easy. We were totally underfinanced, so underfinanced. But we were able to have a captive audience immediately, because those chefs understood immediately the difference between a chicken or a duck or a quail that was coming from us and something that was factory farmed by one of those big conglomerates.
Right.
They didn't need that education. They already had that education. Just looking at those two chickens, just blind tasting those two chickens, they understood right away the value of ours. And that's how we were able to grow pretty fast, probably even too fast, in the first year. And that's why it was so difficult, because we were underfinanced and always chasing to be able to grow. But in the same time, we build the company D'Artagnan with the respect of our clients, and that helped a lot. And even if only psychologically, it's really nice to be able to wake up in the morning and know that whatever you're going to do during the day is worthwhile, because a lot of people respect what you're doing. And so that's how we grew the last 35 years.
Yeah, it's a great story, a great success story. You've reminded me of the other reason that I was eager to speak with you, because I wrote a cookbook some years ago, based on my experience. And the principle behind the cookbook, to be honest with you, is I say to people, if I have a cooking philosophy, it's get the best ingredients you can and don't mess them up too much. And I don't usually use the word mess, but since we're on the air, I'll keep it at that. So, and I know that that's the same thing that you're saying. It's the philosophy behind your company, is that the raw materials matter. So everything that you do is dedicated to, essentially offering up the best. Now, I'm going to interrupt my own flow, because having mentioned foie gras, I am compelled to now ask you, what the F with New York State and other states that contemplate making it not legal? What is your feeling? What is your position about that?
Well, we've been fighting successfully. We were able to take off the ban from Chicago. So Chicago is back with a vengeance, with a lot of foie gras.
Yep.
And then other states tried, like Maryland, and we were able to fight it out, and Massachusetts and New Jersey. Lots of states have tried, and not really the states, but simply some vegetarian activists who went and took an easy target, maybe an ambitious politician that could be vegetarian, and explain to them, hey, you should ban foie gras. It's an easy target. The illustration is very gore, to have that funnel inside the esophagus of the duck, and you're not going to lose any of your electorate, because nobody cares, because it's not known. This is not a food that people care about, and so that's how those activists were successful in finding support and an ear with the politicians. Right. And that's what happened last fall in New York City. On top of that, with the help of some money. So there was a lot of electorate campaign help, financial help by those activists. And that makes it easier, to go on their camp. The problem is we invited them. There were only 2 farms in America, and they are both upstate New York. Mm-hmm. So we invited all the New York councilmen to come to the farm. It's 2 hours away. Just come to the farm. Nice. Bring a vet. Bring an advisor. Bring anybody you want, as long as they are not member of PETA, because members of PETA, of course, are never going to be objective. Mm-hmm. Not one out of, how many are they? 42, 40, 43? not one councilman came to visit the farms. They don't care. They didn't care. All they cared about was taking the money for their political campaign and listen to those activists who were telling them, hey, there is nothing to lose. You're not going to lose one voter by doing this.
Right.
And that's terrible. So they voted for a ban. The ban is effective in 2022. So we have some time to address it. And we started addressing it and suing the city because it is just not right. You know, it's just wrong. I mean, there is no cruelty in what we're doing. There is no stress in what the farmers are doing. And that's where we left it when the pandemic and the crisis came on. And so I'm sure people have other fish to fry right now. So
yeah. Let's talk about my favorite subject, Ariane, which is food. You know, we talk about foie gras, we talk about coming from duck or from geese. I guess my kind of complaint as someone who has spent, 35 years traveling around the world and eating around the world and reporting on it and writing about it is when I come back home, I can't help but think that Americans, generally speaking, I will generalize here, have have somewhat of a limited palate, and specifically here, I think about rabbit a lot. I think about the fact that when I was in school, when we were in cooking school, we ate rabbit. We you know what I mean. That was we just did it. And I'm trying to think of what else that we had that would be. But my point being that why is it here, unless it's as a simple explanation as familiarity? Why is it that we don't have more rabbit? That we don't have more duck? That we don't eat more frogs legs, this kind of thing. What's your sense of where the American kind of palate is insofar as it, applies to those different types of proteins?
So I'm going to enlarge the question a little bit because this all started at World War II when there was a baby boom. People were afraid that after the war that we wouldn't have enough food to eat. And then that's when all those CAFOs and factory farming started, and the marketing that went with it to make people eat all the same thing, the same burger, the same factory farm meats, or take and process those meats into hot dogs and other super highly processed foods with ingredients inside to make you salivate and eat more, but that are bad for you. And so we arrive today at a point where we're not there anymore. There is a huge education process that the consumer has done on himself or herself, and that's a beauty to see. That the people are getting a conscience, and they are getting very conscious of the fact that it's very important to know where your food comes from and to eat wholesome food. So you're talking about, for some, adventurous food. I can tell you I've been to places where people ask me, duck? Do you eat duck? Really? I heard that. And it was a while ago, but still I heard that. And of course, not in the big cities where people tend to travel more,
right.
But in the suburbs, yes, I have heard that. But now, and in the last 20 years, I can say that without generalizing, that really America has gone a long way and education has gone a long way. And you have people like Anthony Bourdain and Julia Child and Jacques Pepin, but also Michael Pollan and right. Michael Woolman, all those guys who have written about food and the bad food and the good food, and who have made a TV series about it, etc. And so thanks to them and to TV channels too, like and Andrew Zimmer, all. Thanks to them, there is a conscience, there is an education of the consumer. Now we're not there yet as far as getting more adventurous. So you're not going to eat frog legs or rabbit outside of on the menu in a restaurant once in a while. It's going to grow, it's going to change, but it takes time. Yeah. But this is not the big problem. I mean, it's going to take the time that it needs to take. That's not a big deal. What is a big deal is that we are talking from both sides of our mouth, and that when people who are educated, who have read about it, who are adamant that it's so important to know where your food comes from and to buy only organic chickens or free-range, vegetable-fed, air-chilled chickens on one side, and then on the other, they go to that food truck and they buy that chicken tacos and they don't even ask what kind of chicken is in there. Or they feed their kids, no, but seriously, yes. Or they feed their kids hot dogs, and hot dogs where the ingredients inside are totally obscure. Right. And I'm flabbergasted by the fact that we can talk on one side and be so conscious and so, hey, my eggs have to be from cage-free hens, and on the other, feeding fast food burger to the kids twice a week, yeah, and not seeing the hypocrisy, but also the contradiction in this. And so, to me, the priority is not to gear people towards quail and rabbit and guinea hens and duck and bison and venison. I hope they would. Right now, they do mostly in restaurants, not really at home. Right. We're trying to change that, and it's happening little by little, and I'm happy to see that. But really, the big priority is to be more conscious more of the time, all the time, instead of only when you're sitting at a restaurant. Yeah. So that's my pet peeve. That's my big battle right now.
Yeah, it's a very astute observation, which I hadn't really considered, because on the one hand, your point is well taken. The big picture is that as a culture, we're far more aware than ever before of where the food comes from, and people generally, at least more of a cross-section of people are opting for better quality, more organic, more free range, more local, etc., etc. But also as a culture, we're not really good at moderation. We're kind of we're good at extremes. And anyway, the point of the story is, yeah, you're right. It makes me laugh to consider what it is that you're saying. That on the one hand, everybody's kind of looking for like super quality stuff and still feeding garbage and sugar to the kids. But your story, Ariane, is funny because I've interviewed Jacques Pepin a number of times, and I'll never forget the first time that I interviewed him, and he said, yeah, well, when I came to America, and that might have been like, I don't think it was 59, but let's call it like mid-60s. And he had a place, Jacques did, in New York City, and he went to the supermarket, and he was just looking for some mushrooms. So he asked the guy, because he doesn't see any, he goes, where do you find the mushrooms? And they sent him over to aisle 7, where all the mushrooms were in a can, like literally in a can. And so, you know what I mean? So it's like there has been, over these past 35 years, a giant improvement, to your point. I suppose especially in kind of major, metro markets. But I do appreciate where you're coming from in general. You're not worried about people going for the exotics at this point, but just being smarter about what they choose day in, day out in terms of food quality. So that's I like that. Hey, here's a selfish.
But it's true, and you say, yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Say what you can say.
That no, it's not only in big cities, and it has allowed us, D'Artagnan, to grow nicely, because today we have 5 distribution centers.
Right.
One near New York, one near Atlanta, one near Chicago, one in Houston, and one in Denver. And so without that clientele, without that education of the consumer, we could never have grown this way, So yeah. I am thankful of that movement, which is not a trend. It's a true movement and a true education. I only wish that it would go a little faster, and that certain behavior, which are a mystery to me, would last weekend was the 4th of July, and I was invited to a very good friend of mine who had the first socially distanced but pretty good party. There were like 28 people, tables all dispersed, and really nice wines. And she decided to do a tenderloin of Wagyu on the grill. It was beautiful. It was so good. And I was glad to be able to supply that to her from that Strub Ranch in Texas, where they raise the beef without the feedlots and without antibiotics and without any medication. Mm-hmm. And then as the afternoon was going towards the end, and it was not yet time to eat the real dinner, she came out with hot dogs, and hot dogs of the worst kind, and that and I called her on it. And why? First of all, how much meat do we need in one evening? And 2, why? And she just said it's tradition. 4th of July, we have to have hot dogs, period. And that's, I just cannot understand this, It's just, to me, it's mind-boggling. I cannot understand. Why would you? Tradition is tradition a good reason enough to have a bad behavior, to poison people with crap? Because there is crap in hot dog,
yes.
In those. I'm talking about those
industrial
factory farm.
Industrial.
Yeah. I'm not going to say the brand, but you know what I mean.
No, I know exactly what you mean. When I was in 9th grade, I had an English teacher. And I only remember it because I remember he said hot dogs, that's made of the meat, that's the 4 Ds. I go, what's the 4 Ds? Dead, dying, deceased, and disabled. Those are the cows that they use to grind up to make hot dogs. So it's I totally get what you're saying, and it is laughable. I want you to know, by the way, not because I want you to be proud of me, but I actually was able to figure out, not that I'm that interested in tradition, I was just interested in some hot dogs recently. And mine were made of organic turkey meat. And I gotta be honest with you, they were very, very good. I mean, I didn't miss anything from it. I honestly, you put a little mustard, a little sauerkraut, a little relish. Organic turkey hot dogs on the grill were great.
Hey, fine. As long as you know that the meat in there is not the eyeballs of some cattle.
Exactly, the eyeballs and the lips. Now here's my I'm coming to you from the eastern end of Long Island, which has a long history of growing things, farms. We have corn, tomatoes, potatoes, but I also, chicken farm nearby where I can get fresh chicken. And eggs and that kind of thing. But also, there's not a day that goes. So here's my question for you. It sounds kind of silly, but I just don't. It occurred to me, and I know you would know the answer to this. I am surrounded by rabbits. I can't pull into my own driveway without seeing a dozen of them. Are all rabbits basically, I mean, not that I could, I'm not capable of it, I wouldn't know how to do it, but are all rabbits edible, or are some, I know that some are going to be better, you're going to tell me that, but I mean, these rabbits that I see floating around here, could they be somebody's food?
Possibly. Here is the thing, you have basically 3 kinds, to simplify a little bit. You have the domestic rabbit, which are raised by farmers.
Okay.
They are in the United States. They are mostly, when they are raised for meat, they are mostly a cross between a California and a New Zealand breed. And it's a nice breed that grows pretty easily. And when you buy those rabbits, you have again to make sure that they were not fed any antibiotics in their life. Then you have the jack rabbits, which are wild rabbits, the ones that you find in Long Island.
Yep.
And these are perfectly fine to eat as long as they didn't themselves eat some crappy things that were sprayed with pesticides or stuff like that.
Right.
And that's kind of the problem when you are in areas that are not totally the wild, but that are where you have a lot of civilization, basically.
Right.
And that's the bet that you're making, with a jackrabbit. And then you have a third kind, which is called a hare. Mm-hmm. And a hare, Hare,
right.
Is the same family, much bigger, very wild, and that you find in the US, you find in Texas, you find in the Midwest, but in rural areas. And there, I wouldn't have any problems eating hare that somebody would have hunted. But jackrabbits, if they are too close to civilization, I would be careful. It's the same thing as when people ask me, shall I eat Canadian geese? Well, Canadian geese, when they migrate, they half migrate today, and they stayed all winter in pretty cold places because there is food anyway. And food could be the popcorn that the kids are throwing at them, or stuff that are not necessarily desirable. So you have to know or to guess what those wild animals ate before you decide to eat it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that is literally the bottom line when it comes to food, that I think people should really understand that what you're eating is a byproduct of what it is eating. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
That's an important consideration. It kind of reminds me, here's a question I wasn't really contemplating until that, but I've spent a lot of time in Argentina, and they make a big deal about their beef down there because the cattle is raised on the pampas and basically is all grass fed, where American beef is traditionally corn fed. What can you help me and people understand? And by the way, I ended up doing a beautiful trip to Ireland. I was blown away. It's because of how they kind of process their cattle over there, of the beauty of their meat because of all of the grass that those animals are eating. What generally should people know about the distinction between kind of grass fed versus corn fed when it comes to kind of beef?
Okay. So again, there is nothing bad about feeding grains to cattle. What is bad is when you do it in an intensive manner, when you do it in a factory farming. So you have basically two kinds of beef. The beef that has started on grass, because all beef starts on grass. Mm-hmm. In America, mostly today is Angus and a little bit of Wagyu. Wagyu takes longer, that's why it's more expensive. So you start them on grass, and then you finish them several months before processing. You finish them on grain. And to finish them on grain, there are two ways to do that. Either you take the cattle, you put it in a feedlot, you cramp them in the feedlot that has a bare soil because they are all, it's overcrowded there. And that's where you feed them solely corn or grain, mostly grain. Mm-hmm. And of course, because it is overcrowded, they need to be medicated. And of course, because we need to make it cheaper, they need to be medicated to grow faster. Okay, and that's your factory farming, and that's what ends up in most of the fast food hamburgers.
Right.
And then there is a nice way to raise cattle grain fed, as long as you feed them the corn, but in the field, in the same field that they are still eating the grass on. It's perfectly fine. And it gives a marble, that grain gives a marble to the meat that gives that taste, that very complex taste that is so desirable.
Yeah.
Now, on the grass-fed, on certified grass-fed and not grain finished, you have to be a little bit careful, because that grass-fed cattle could come from Angus, who at 18 months, 19 months old, 2 years old, he's being processed. Then, for sure, you have the advantages of grass-fed, meaning more omega-3 in the meat, but you're not going to have the texture and the complexity of taste that you're looking for. In order to find pleasure in grass-fed beef, you have to raise that beef a very long time on grass, so that it develops naturally what grain would have brought faster.
Right.
And so at D'Artagnan, we have both kinds. We actually have 3 kinds. We also have Wagyu, that is grain-fed, but up to 3.5 years old. Then we have pasture-raised, grain-finished, not in feedlots, never in feedlots. And those animals are totally natural, and they haven't had any antibiotics, nor growth hormones, nor medication from birth. And those are very palatable. They have a palate of marble that is Choice Plus to Prime, which is a very nice marble and very, very delicious, sensuous feeling in the mouth. And then our grass-fed cattle comes from animals who are actually 4 years old, 5 years old. And it's difficult to fathom it, because time is money, in cattle. But the difference in taste is so impressive. And so when you have the luxury of the time, and you already have those large prairies and very plentiful grasses, and then you can produce grass-fed beef that is absolutely beautiful, and that's how, by the way, in Europe people are eating beef, and it's mostly grass-fed, and it does a great, beautiful result.
So just for my own edification, if money is no object, and I'm ordering from you, what's the beef that what's the cut that I'm getting? What's the type?
It depends on your taste. If money is no object, I would go for a ribeye or a strip loin of Wagyu, because that's my super favorite, and that's when you understand Select, Choice, Prime, Wagyu is like 5 degrees above Prime. It's very, very marbled, and it's a delicious piece of meat. Now, then the next step would be pasture-raised, grain-finished, nice animals, 2 years old minimum, and naturally raised. So they are a consistent Choice Plus to Prime, and very, very palatable. And then, if you like, first of all, if you don't want that level of fat, if you want a leaner meat, but that you want still delicious meat, but leaner, then go on grass-fed, but understand which grass-fed you're buying. And I'm talking, for D'Artagnan here, but we have contracted farmers in a southern island of Australia, where they raise those animals for 5 years on this island,
right.
and it does wonders. And that those pieces of meat are unbelievable.
Yeah.
And that's what our grass-fed beef program is all about. But it's also the most affordable one, simply because grain is expensive. So when you feed grain to an animal, it adds cost to that animal husbandry.
Yeah, I hear you. Very interesting. I this may seem kind of like a silly question, but when when the USDA stamps their prime on meat, that meat can be coming from the large scale kind of industrial farms. Am I correct?
So the grades don't mean anything as far as animal husbandry.
Okay.
All the grades means is the degree of fat that is intermuscular.
Right.
You know, those little veins of white fat that are inside. And it's very desirable for the taste, but it doesn't mean that the animal was well raised or not.
Exactly. Okay.
So those grades are select, choice, prime.
Right.
Yeah,
I just wanted to make sure. I don't want to, because I'm happy always to be talking about food, but I think it's important because we both mentioned it a little bit in the beginning. Your business had a pivot, as did the entire restaurant industry. It's very sad, especially if you're from, I'm from New York. Okay, so what's happening with restaurants at this point is painful. Not from my perspective, but from their perspective, from business. I was hearing Danny Meyer talking today about how, if they're forced into a 50% capacity, as an example, they can't really sustain any business. They don't start to break even until they're at 75 or 80% of capacity. It obviously completely kind of threw off your business if you're doing 3/4 of your revenue, through on-premise restaurant trade. I don't even know what the right question is. I'm just trying to put out in front of people like what they should understand and what they might be able to do on a personal level to help in some way.
What they might be able to do on a personal level is to support the local and the small farmers. That's the most important thing, because the restaurateur is not here anymore to do that.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. On the restaurant level, right now there is not much to do except to support the ones who actually are open and were able to open a terrace or were able to open on a delivery and takeout system. And that's really, at an individual level, that's really the best that can be done. And otherwise, we just have to pray for a vaccine to come as soon as possible and to be able to have all these establishments reopen as soon as possible. Because meanwhile, it's a lot of people that are out of work right now. A lot of people.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
All the food industry. Yeah,
it's a nightmare. I want you to know that I went somewhere during this, 15 weeks of whatever it's been, to the local butcher. I wanted poultry, and he said, I have chicken thighs. And I said, well, that's good, because I am addicted to chicken thighs. And of course, they ended up being yours. They ended up being d'Artagnan. So I took home a ton of those. You should know that any time that I go out and purchase duck fat, you should know that it comes from your little canisters there of duck fat.
Good.
Yes, and further, and I'm not showing off here, but I used my own culinary experience to. There's a farm here out in East Hampton that's a chicken farm. And they were limiting the number of chickens of one per person. So I took a chicken. Of course, I bought chicken liver because nobody buys those except for me. I can buy a whole pound of chicken liver from this guy. And they couldn't be better because they just could not be more fresh. And I said, what else do you have? And he said, I have duck. And I I said, frozen or fresh? He said, it's, well, we have both. I really would prefer the fresh. So they gave me a fresh duck. And I'm going to guess, I should know, it's probably a pekin, or one of those, like a pekin kind of thing. Anyway, here's what I've done. This is like so exciting for me. I broke the duck down. I seared the breasts, and I essentially rendered enough fat out of that to make basically like 2 pints or maybe more of duck fat. So I'm out of. I'm not going to buy your stuff for another month or two, just because I produced all of my own. Now that said,
That's good.
Yeah, I felt good about that. I love it. Let's tell before we head off. Let's tell people where they can go online right now and buy extraordinary product from you. Is it d'Artagnan.com exactly? Let's.
Yep.
It is
D'Artagnan.com.
All right.
DARTAGNAN.com.
All right, hang on a second because I am going to now. Okay, everybody, here's what you need to know. DART, AGNAN, D'Artagnan.com. And you're going to be able to find everything from chicken and turkey and duck to foie gras, caviar, meat, game, truffles, and mushrooms. And it's all of the highest quality. It's an extraordinary company that you built. I wish you not only great success in this transitional period, but I look forward to the day that you'll be back delivering full throttle to restaurants throughout these United States of America. Hopefully we'll have a new president by then too. And I never really talk politics on the show because otherwise people would get really crazy with me. But I just want to, again, Ariane, I want to thank you for the time, for the information, for the insight, and for all the work that you've done to produce extraordinary food. I understand why you are both a pioneer and a legend.
Oh, thank you. It was a true pleasure to be here today, and thank you very much for your kind words. That's nice.
My pleasure. Well, there you have it, my friends. My conversation with Ariane Daguin, founder of D'Artagnan. I really enjoyed the conversation with her a lot. I admire her, as you can tell, and I am a big fan and proponent of their products. Go to D'Artagnan.com, DARTAGNAN. Have the stuff, shipped to your home. Or wherever it is that you're going to be preparing delicious food. This, everyone, is episode 84 of All You Can Eat, coming to you in the early part of July, summertime, hot time, delicious time, but certainly a good time to, as always, to find something delightful to cook and to eat. I'll be back with you next week for episode number 85, All You Can Eat, which you can also find, as I have mentioned before, on iHeart Radio. Just search for Rob Rosenthal or All You Can Eat. Or maybe you listen to podcasts on Spotify, and there you can look up All You Can Eat and listen to any one of the 84 episodes where I take up with interesting, accomplished, and talented people from the world of food and eating and restaurants and hospitality and journalism and blah, 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 blah. And as I always say, until we meet again, remember, my friends, life is short, so never waste a meal.
I'm the Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on